Vamos a comenzar. Sorry for the delay. La idea es poder cogerlo y aquí la... ver si te interesa. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the University of Talca, and especially welcome to the School of Civil Engineering and Intelligence Systems and Solutions. We are very happy to host this session today, which aims to bring our students closer to the real world of the video game and e-sport industry. Our school is dedicated to training professionals who can design, develop, and innovate in interactive technologies, video games, and intelligence systems. We strongly believe that university education should be closely connected to the current challenges of the industry, to creative and technological communities, and to the opportunities emerging in the global digital entertainment ecosystem. Today, video games represent one of the most influential creative and technological industries in the world. They not only provide new forms of entertainment, but also create spaces for innovation, technological development, and diverse professional careers. Within this ecosystem, esports have become a global phenomenon that brings together millions of players and spectators, requiring professionals from many different fields, from technology and experience design to event production, community management, and competitive operations. In this context, we are honored to have a very special guest with us today. Joining us is Diego Varona, who is level designer and part of the professional ecosystem around Riot Games, and has been actively involved in the development of esports and competitive experiences in Latin America. His work connects communities, players, events, and audience, contributing to the growth of a strong and vibrant competitive scene in the region. For our students, listening to professionals from the industry is an invaluable opportunity. It allows them to understand how a passion for video games can become a real professional career, to learn about the challenges of working in these fields, and to discover the many opportunities available to those who want to be part of this industry. We are very happy to create this space for conversation and learning. We hope this talk will inspire our students, provide new perspectives about the industry, and help them imagine the different paths they can pursue in the world of the video games and esports. Without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our guest today, Diego Varona.
Hi everyone. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time that you guys have taken out of your day to come and hear me talk about Valorant or talk about game dev in general. I'll just get started. I'm Diego. Hi. I've been at Riot for almost 3 years now. I actually started as an intern, believe it or not, all the way back in 2022 when I first graduated college. Sorry. Yeah, so I actually worked on Team Deathmatch as like my first ever project on Valorant, where I helped design systems, help balance agents, and stuff like that. And so afterwards, after I worked on Team Deathmatch, I actually moved over to the maps team, which I've been ever since. I haven't released a map of my own just yet, but I have worked on a lot of map updates, such as the change to the B main wall on Ascend, the bigger changes that we did to Abyss and Pearl last year, and then as well as more recently the changes to Haven and Corrode that were focused more on wall penetration. And actually, a little bit about myself. I'm going to read this in Spanish now. Un dato curioso es que mi familia es de Colombia y al estar en Chile realmente estoy pudiendo desarrollar mis habilidades para hablar español. Sin embargo, para los propósitos de esta presentación, hablar en inglés, ya que mi español no es muy fluido, pero algunas lecciones contendrán español para que puedas leer más fácilmente. Okay. So yeah. So without further ado, so this presentation is going to be real brief. I'll try to keep it quick so we can have time for questions. But it'll kind of go over our philosophy for map balance. Not so much map design. We can definitely get into that a bit more. But just to keep it simple, for those of you who play Valorant as well, any hands who plays Valorant here? Anyone? Okay, decent amount. Nice. Yeah, for those who play, how are you liking the road so far? Yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down. You can be real. It's okay if you don't like it. It's okay. You won't hurt my feelings.
I haven't played it. I haven't played it. No.
But yeah, I mean, the map's been in the pool for a little bit, and watching players create like new strategies, new compositions, create new lineups, and find like the really weird Odin spam spots like Brock have been really fun to watch as a developer and as a designer. And so, yeah, I think usually a lot of the questions we get quite often is, when will there be a Corrode update, or when will there be a map update in general? Like when or how do we decide updates? And so just to like dive into that a little bit more, for new maps like Corrode, learning them takes time, and we want to give time and space for players to learn new maps, and make sure that they have the space to feel confident in like kind of forming the meta themselves. We don't ever want to force anything onto our players. We want you guys to feel like you are experiencing the sandbox, so to speak. And so, whether that be, find out new team compositions, new lineups, figure out which guns work best. We all kind of want to leave that in the hands of you. But, when the new map releases, we do try to keep an eye on it, not only looking for like really big bugs, like game-breaking bugs, but also just like keeping an eye on if the design is working the way we intended to. And sometimes, that works, or sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it needs tweaking. But when we do need to tweak them out, we usually try to be a little bit more precise on what we want to change. And so, for example, the most recent changes to Corrode and Haven, for those of you who don't play Valorant, we have weapons that can penetrate through walls, very high powered weapons like a machine gun called the Odin. And while we think that the Odin and like other guns that have high weapon penetration, like high wall penetration, are good for the game because they do a lot of things in terms of like forcing players to play differently, allows for different strategies to occur. There are some spots where we thought that, hey, like we think this is healthy, but it was a little bit too unhealthy in certain spots where there wasn't a lot of counterplay for other players who didn't have that specific type of weaponry. And so, we kind of looked at around some places where, like, hey, where can we change the wall material, basically? Something super simple, but it takes a lot of time to just, understand, like, hey, like, what will this do in the long term? Because even though it might seem like a basic texture swap, basically, it takes a lot of, like, iteration and testing to, like, figure out, like, hey, is this meeting our goal, basically? And a lot of map design in Valorant is a lot of goals. Like we have like one usual like large goal that we try to follow. And that goes for map updates as well. And we think that we want to be pretty elegant with our changes. We don't want there to be change for the sake of change, where we change all of these different things and now you have to relearn everything. And it gets, as a player who plays Valorant, you spend like hundreds of hours playing the game. And, even moving a box sometimes can be kind of painful because you have the muscle memory now. Like if you ever play Valorant and you get flashed, you can't see anything. But if you know the map, you can be blind and still walk around. So all that stuff is, thank you. So yeah, that's all the stuff we take into consideration where we don't want to change things just to change things. We want to keep our changes elegant and small enough. So again, the texture swap, basically, it's like that was the smallest thing we could do, and it had quite a large impact, we think, which is great. But sometimes maps need a lot more love. They need to have a lot more change, and so sometimes we need to be, sometimes we gotta take the hammer and like kind of redo the whole map sometimes. That's kind of what we're doing with so shout out to Joey Simmons, who was the level designer on this particular project. He did a great job at like really looking at what was making Breach frustrating for players and kind of distilled it down into like, hey, like this is what we need to keep, this is what we can't, this is what we don't want to keep, and kind of figure out the in between. Just to give, I guess, a little more insight into like the level design process here, like we really like blew the map up. Like it was like almost like you couldn't even tell it was Breeze anymore. Just because of like the idea of like, hey, like let's go for the most extreme thing possible first, and then we can start dialing back and figuring out like, hey, like does this what elements of the map do we want to bring back that helps it feel like Breeze? So for example, on A site, I don't know if it's this image, but on one of the sites there's this very large pyramids, and the pyramids are pretty iconic to the map, and although they have some weird gameplay to them, like nothing that you would expect out of a usual tech shooter, a lot of people like the pyramids because of how they look, and sometimes we're like, okay, well, the map has been out for so long, you kind of have to keep the pyramids because of that. So I think there's a lot of stuff we have to take into consideration while updating maps, and familiarity is one of them. So yeah, and so side by side, you can see like old and new breeds. Like you can definitely tell that there's some similarities between old and new breeds, but if you played the map, like you definitely know like we changed a lot, and we know that short term it'll be pretty rough to have to redo everything, like redo your comps, redo your lineups, figure out what else might be good still on new breeds, but we think that the short term, again, maybe the short term frustration is better for the long term health of the game. And I think it just puts the map in a better place to help us balance it even more in the future. It's okay. It's alright. But yeah, basically the video is going to go through like the before and after changes of what Breeze used to look like. And kind of show you like how much we really did change. A lot of it was definitely like closing off, because for those who don't know, Breeze is a really big map, has a lot of long range engagements, lots of sniper rifles, lots of long range engagements. And we found that while we do like long range engagements, again, that's one of the goals of the map. If Breeze doesn't have long range engagements, it doesn't end up feeling like Breeze anymore. And so that's kind of why our design works with Breeze. It's like, hey, whatever we do to the map, don't change this. It needs to have long range engagements. That's the whole identity. That's what Breeze is. Don't change this, but you can change everything else if you need to. Make sure that this one North Star stays the same throughout. And so a lot of that was just like, okay, well, we have the long range engagements, but a lot of the spaces are actually quite big. And so we're like, okay, what if we just narrowed it down a bit more? And so, yeah, that was kind of like the philosophy. There's a lot of that where it's like, hey, let's take these spaces and just kind of like shrink them down. Like if I were to go to this one, like you can see in mid, we really like made the mid like kind of skinny and stuff like that. And we got rid of a bunch of other paths that really didn't make sense. Not necessarily made sense in terms of like, why would you go here? I think it's more from a level design perspective. It's like when you have a bunch of extra paths that don't end up towards the main focal point of like the game mode, for example, where there's an area called halls, and you could just kind of like walk through there and end up in defender spawn. And while it's good for some strategies, we wanted to kind of funnel players towards the site. Again, very passively with like level design, you want players to kind of not know that they're ending up in a certain spot. We could kind of just leave them there, and they don't realize that. And so what old Breeze was doing is that they had a lot of extra paths that didn't really lead directly to main combat areas, and so we wanted to get rid of those and just like, hey, like wherever you go, you should be going towards somewhere that is important, basically. So yeah, I think that is all for now. We can have like a Q&A for anyone who wants to ask questions. You can ask me about anything, like Valorant related, like maps and stuff like that. You can ask me game dev questions, like what software do you use and all that stuff. Yeah, here's that.
So where do you get the suggestion to change the maps? Like, do you take YouTube views, social media? Where do you get things?
I mean, actually helps a lot with like helping us know what the community is saying about the map, our maps, or the game in general. So we listen to a lot of community feedback. It's interesting to have to like, I guess, because Valorant is a very competitive game and people will get very angry very easily, and so the anger comes from passion, and so a lot of the time we do a bit more directly. We do a bit more directly. We do listen to a lot of community feedback, and like I said, YouTube reviews and like social media posts. We all look at that. So.
What is the process for making a map or making changes to a map?
Yeah, this question. Yeah, so the whole process for making a map kind of starts at a design goal, like I mentioned before, where we have one main goal that we try to follow and execute like really well on. And so for Corrode is one of our newest maps, and so the main goal for Corrode was to have layered defenses, and so the idea with that is that if a defender takes aggressive space, that they should feel confident falling back like further and further onto the site, not feel like they have to just like run away completely. They should be able to feel like they can hold their ground more. And that goal can be executed on in so many different ways, especially in mobile design. Like there's no one clear answer. There's a lot of different ways for you to achieve your goal in mobile design. And so it just kind of like, hey, like basically what did you find that works the best and does it feel great to play? So all of our router maps kind of come from like that gameplay point first. Like we don't ever know what the maps are going to be until like a lot later in development, like for Corrode or Breeze even, like we kind of just have gray blocks that we have and we push around. The term gray boxing. That's all we do on mobile design, which is like, hey, find the gameplay, make it fun, and we'll worry about the art later. Especially with Valorant being such a competitive game, we really care about the gameplay a lot. And once we get into the art phase, we talk to the artists a lot on the design side to make sure that the art looks great, but also looks great for gameplay. We don't want players losing because they accidentally walked up on a rock and displaced their crosshair, right? Like we don't want any of that. If you play Counter-Strike, you might know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so we, no shade on Counter-Strike. I love that game too, but I don't appreciate that stuff personally. But yeah, and so we really want to take a gameplay first approach on everything we do for Valorant. And I think as a designer, I know that as a designer, I talk to artists a lot more than other designers would on other games. Like if you're making The Last of Us and you gray box your level, and you just kind of, from what I understand, is that you kind of give it to the artist, and then you kind of just like are consulting on it a little bit, but you're not like giving direct feedback to the art because it's out of your wheelhouse now. You design the level, and now they're going to go make it look pretty and awesome. Valorant is similar, but I'm definitely a lot more involved in the art process, which I think is a bit different compared to those studios.
What's the actual job of the designer? Like, you just go to an office and talk to all the people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to talk more about Riot as a company, we're hybrid currently, so I could decide to be in the office or decide to be at home. I think we have like a minimum number of days we have to be in the office, like most hybrid companies. But yeah, I go to the office, I chat to my team. Usually, I'm either in a playtest or moving around blocks. So people, usually tell me in the trip like, hey, like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I try to give them the most gameplay oriented feedback possible. I try to leave out like personal taste when it comes to art sometimes, because it's I'm not an artist. I don't know what like I know the very basics of 3D modeling, like vertices and like UVing and stuff like that. But I definitely don't have like artistic theory, so to speak. But yeah, I go to the office. I mean I can tell you about my schedule actually. Like I wake up, make sure nothing's broken on Slack. But I check my phone to check like our like team messages and see if I broke anything overnight by accident. If I did, I try to fix it right away. If I don't, it's like cool. I get to maybe chill a little bit longer in the morning before my first meeting. But then we have like an art review for like an hour, and we just all the artists talk together, and I'm just kind of there as like a consultant for design, just giving them feedback if they need it for gameplay. And then after that, I play test for about like an hour and a half, where we play the game, play all the new content that we're trying to make. Playtesting is a really big part of being a designer, especially on Valorant. Like we play the game a lot, like, at least during like in 1 week, like 8 hours a week of just playtesting the game at work. So, and then I go home and play some more because I like the game. So yeah, it's fun. I'd say it's fun, but it can also be really challenging. Like there are times where I just kind of like sit on my desk and I'm just like that. Man, I'm gonna go walk around. I think like your brain gets very fried. Like there's a lot of times where I actually don't talk sometimes during the day because I'm just like so deep in thought that like my brain just gets absolutely fried. And I think a lot of designers are very similar. Where at the end of the day, we don't even say anything to each other. We're just like dinner. You're like, we don't say much. So yeah, but overall, I mean, I love my job. So yeah.
So, do you consider yourself happy? And where do you want it to be? Are you doing what you want to do?
Yeah, I would say so. I guess more context about myself. Like, I started playing League back in high school, like back in 2014. So I've been like a Riot Games gamer for almost over 10 years at this point. And I played Counter Strike way before that as well, like Counter Strike Source and Go. So I was a big fan of tech shooters as well. I think back in the day, I was like, oh, I'd love to work for Valve and like make Counter Strike maps or just do anything for Counter Strike because I also wanted to be a pro player at some point. I think everyone had that type of shape, and I wasn't that good enough. So, but yeah, I think I always loved video games from when I was young. I remember I was a huge fan of like the old Assassin's Creed games. And like those games are sick. I don't really like the new ones. You can ask me why later. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved video games since I was a kid, and I really do like competitive multiplayer games because I do have like a background in like sports. Like I was a competitive swimmer basically my whole life until like graduated college. And so having the feeling of being able to compete without like I guess the need to like swim anymore, like is really nice. Like the feeling of being in a competition is really exhilarating in sport and in esports. So I just I do like what I'm doing. Yeah.
From your experience, what's the best and the worst of working at Riot?
You still hear me okay, right? It's okay.
Yes.
I do a little closer. Yes. Okay, perfect. I won't move that. Sorry, the best and worst of working at Riot, right? I'd say the best is definitely the culture. We definitely are, I don't feel awkward or feel like I have to, I guess I don't really feel awkward when I talk to my teammates or like feel like, oh, like I have to be, I have to like sugarcoat anything. I think we all know the job we're there to do. And so it's like, hey, I had gameplay feedback. Just here it is, basically, and no one takes it personally. I think it's great because it just helps us make a better game. I think if you start putting like feelings into feedback, you can start getting like really weird, starts to detract from your actual feedback. And so if you just give objective feedback, people take it objectively and don't take it personally. I think that's all you can ask for really, and that's what a lot of people do at Riot. And I think, in general, like the company's cool, like We get free food. That's great. Then I guess some of the more, I guess, difficult parts of working at Riot is like, the game that we work on serves a lot of people, and it's hard to make all those people happy all the time, because everyone is so different, obviously. And so, there's times where like, trying to ideate on a new map or an update, and we're like, do we even like this? Like, are we making the right shot? And, people like Ashley and like we have other teams as well that help us figure out like, what do players want, what do players like. But even then, like, you've seen other games where it's like, I'm sure the devs thought they were making something that people were gonna enjoy for a really long time, and then turns out no one likes it. I think that's always the scariest part of game dev, where you click on something for so long and you kind of like put your child out to the world, and it's like, okay, cool, bye. And it's like, okay. Yeah, I think that for any game dev, I think that's probably like the hardest part. It's like, I don't know if people are gonna like this, and you can just hope that your instincts, like your personally, like for me, I use my instinct of the player a lot to like kind of gauge how people will like something. So that's a lot. That's the best I can do, really. Yeah. Yeah.
So, you and your team have some info about the work on a new map outside Greece?
No.
No?
There was some stuff on like online that was just, I don't know where they got that from. So no.
Yeah.
Almost.
How much the high competitive scene like Valorant Masters affect the configuration of the map?
Okay, yeah. So I guess your question like on the map pool, like I'd say we definitely take it into consideration. I guess for more context on map pools in general, we usually decide map pools like kind of on two things. One is variety of play styles if possible, right? Where if you have a lot of maps that play kind of similarly, granted not all maps are the same, obviously, but they do have similar play styles when it comes to picking certain characters. And so you want to have a wide range of possibilities there, where if you've been watching Masters, Santiago, you'll see that like there's a lot of neon on Split, but when you go to Breeze, which is a more long range map, you see a lot of different types of characters. That's kind of like what we like to see. It's like, hey, like each map has its own way that you play it, and then between playing each map can vary a lot. And so we just want there to be just kind of a variety of play styles that we support in the map pool, because I think every map playing the same-ish can be a bit, stale, especially a pro player, where it's like, hey, they're just playing the same exact comp in every map, because every map, can warrant that. I think it gets a little bit stale, in my opinion. But I mean, yeah, this event has been great so far. And I think that is partially due to the map pool being pretty widespread in terms of like what it's asking you to do. Another thing is, we do take into consideration player reception on maps. So if you can understand what that means, I'll just leave it there. But we do take that into consideration where, player affinity for certain maps, and we don't want to like keep maps in the pool that players don't have a lot of affinity for it. But like, okay, we'll keep it in here for a little bit and we'll take it out and call it a day. But yeah, but for esports events, we actually build our map pool quite heavily around esports events. Like we cannot change anything like 3 months in advance for esports events because teams have to practice. So it's a lot of juggling where it's like, hey, like this map pool has been in here for like 3 months. Players like such as yourselves are getting bored of it now because you guys have been playing like nonstop for 3 months. But the pros are like, no, please don't change it. We have like 15 different strategies just for this A take on Breeze. Please, we won't forget to take Breeze out. And so it's definitely a lot to juggle. So.
I have 2 questions actually. The first one is that you told us that after you finished the coach, you went straight to Riot. And I kind of think about because we students tend to work first on smaller studios before going to a large one. Me myself, I tried actually going to internship, but the time we get, like time to go into internships during college is different in the US, so it doesn't feel well. But I actually want to know how was it like the Giants trade is such a large company with such a large team working with so many people and so many variables at the same time.
Yeah. I think so. As an intern, they do kind of shield you a bit from like the weird stuff, I would say. Not weird stuff in terms of like, oh, everyone's weird, but it's like weird stuff in terms of like, having to know like product goals or having to know like certain nuances of the game where they're like, hey, you're an intern. This is what you're going to be working on for like your next 3 months. Just worry about that. Don't worry about anything else. And so I appreciate that. As an intern, like working at a big company, it helps that they just kind of put me in my own lane and let me do my own thing and just let me learn through there. But when I joined again full time, I guess the hardest thing for me was that like there is not any handholding like compared to college, like absolutely none. It is like you have to really go out of your way to like talk to people and like I make it sound like, oh, that's such a big deal, like you have to go talk to people, duh. But I think coming from college, like the teachers come to you quite often and they're like, hey, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you gotta do that, and you have a manager that will tell you that, like, hey, you gotta do this, this, and that, but if you need help from someone else that's not in your discipline, you need to go out and reach out to them. You need to, ask them for what they think. And if you need to work with them on something, okay, well, now you're taking time out of their day to help you. And so now you need to like talk to their producer, like, hey, can I steal this guy for like 2 hours a day basically to help me on this thing? And they're like, well, no, because he's working on this project. And so there's a lot of wires that overlap that you start to realize, you're like, man, if I really want anything done, I need to ask like 3 months in advance almost, at least on the dev side. Because people have their own projects and stuff like that. And I can't just rip someone away from my own personal project and be like, hey, help me make this thing. Because I don't know any coding. It's like, I need an engineer. So come help me with this. And they're like, yeah, I'm already working on a project that we're like 8 months into. I'm like, right, okay, I can't steal you then. So yeah, and a lot of it as well as like personally, like I learned like a lot of my level design stuff on the job. And I think it helped that I played a lot of Counter-Strike and a lot of Valorant, so like it was kind of there passively, but there's a lot. I know some people say like, oh, you'll learn on the job, and I think for game dev, that's definitely true. Especially if you work on if you work in an indie studio or a smaller studio, you're going to wear multiple hats. And like, I guess I should say that technically my first internship was like a really small studio in Philadelphia, where I was like one of 2 people basically. And all I did was like implementation for like this really small like 2D RPG thing. But yeah, going from that to Riot was definitely a big jump. But I would say don't be scared. Like if you ever find yourself in that position, just follow your gut. I had a lot of imposter syndrome when I was there. I was like, how the hell am I here? And like, if you play Counter-Strike, like Volcano works at Valorant as well, like make cash. And so I'm like, I was being a little fanboy. I was like, hey, you make cash. Like, I love cash. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. And I was like, man, that's so cool. But yeah, don't be scared. You're there for a reason. If you ever find yourself, for any job really, if you start to feel like imposter syndrome, you're there for a reason. They picked you for a reason. Just follow your gut and like learn as much as you can. So. Yeah.
How do you so far to make a new map that is not a map of Snapchat and how hard is it?
It's a bit difficult. I think in terms of Valorant itself, there's definitely times where like we're making something or like this looks kind of familiar, and we go to like Haven or Center, like yeah, it's like we kind of the same here. What do we do? And for attack shooters, that's okay because I think there's certain with attack shooters. We kind of think of the maps as a puzzle, and there's only so many like variations of a puzzle piece that you can make that like feels fresh while also feeling fair. But there's definitely something we take into account where like, hey, like we probably shouldn't do it this way because it looks exactly like, or it looks like Haven, or it looks like Ascent. It's like we should probably like not do that. But I think it was funny because I was actually having this conversation in general, like as a wider whole, for like the games industry and like art in general. Like I think a lot of the times people expect us to be making like completely original thoughts and ideas, like, and I don't personally, I don't even think that's possible anymore because there's just so much things that people have been inspired by. Like I played a lot of Counter-Strike, and I'm sure any maps that I make will have some Counter-Strike influence in them at some point. And I think it's okay to like take inspiration from stuff. It's obviously not okay to copy. Like I can't just make Dust 2 and Valorant and call it like. But I think it's more than fine to take inspiration from things, and like if that is like your starting point, to take that and then build it into something that is yours or that works for your game or for whatever you're doing, I think that's more than fine. I mean, you see this in movies all the time. Like everyone references the Akira slide, and everyone's like, "Oh, that looks cool." So yeah.
How do you deal with frustration as a developer individually and as a team?
Yeah, so as a solo developer, frustration definitely comes up, whether it be like I feel like I have a block, like I don't know what to do, like I've been trying a lot of things, it's not working. I think when that happens, I kind of try to take a step back and like, yeah, okay, like what's my goal? I think that's why goals are so important. Where sometimes when you start designing something, you can get lost in the weeds really easily, and you start getting into like the really small details and start like getting frustrated over that. But you can take a step back and be like, okay, is my goal being fulfilled? And if it is, maybe you're getting frustrated for no reason, or if it's not, it's very clear like, okay, something needs to change. And then as a team, if you get frustrated, I guess I'll talk about like the frustrated about work part instead of frustrated with the person. If you're working on a project and your team is frustrated because it doesn't feel like you're making progress, for example, like you're always doing what you need to be doing. You need to like and you're working well together, but something's just not clicking, like in the game itself or in the art or whatever. I think taking a step back again is like, hey, like okay, do we need to change something? Like, don't be afraid to change anything if you feel like it's not working. Like, I think a lot of people fall into like, oh, we put so much time into this, we need to figure this out. Or it's like, no, like if you put the time into figuring it out, it's not working, then you mean that just means you know for a fact it's not going to work. And it's okay to move on to something else. But that being said, the instant something starts to seem like it's not working, you shouldn't just like run away from it right away. You should let it sit there and soak. I think a lot of design, a lot of games as well, like letting things soak or like stay the same for a long time so you can like build up kind of like a good thesis as to what it is, right? Just like in science, like if you start changing the variables all the time, you're not going to know what's wrong with it. And so kind of just leaving it alone and letting it do its thing, and then you play it over for a long time, you're like, actually this could be better. And you start tweaking individual variables instead of like deleting the whole thing. That's what I did a lot early on as a designer. Where it's like I got feedback that this thing wasn't working, and I was like, okay, time to delete the whole map. And so, but then my manager's like, no, just focus on the area that they said was not feeling right and make that better. Don't worry about the rest of the map. So that way, cool. I think it helps a lot in terms of like, you kind of like take it in chunks instead of all at once, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
How much can be the time that your team decide it's time to make some change to a map? Or exist at this time apart from PvP?
So I can't speak to the dev time that it takes totally, but usually like for a new map like Corrode, we try to aim for a year after release, maybe more. It might have like take longer because maybe some problems are a lot larger to fix. But yeah, that's something we're trying to do now, where it's like, hey, like after map launches, we'll let it chill for a year, see how it plays, and then we'll like release an update for it. So yeah.
What common mistakes the beginners level designers make?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is trying to do too much all at once. I think especially in my own experience on Valorant, I was like in this one area, I was like doing a lot of stuff in one area. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, this is so fun, this is so engaging. Like you're having to like move your crosshair everywhere, and it's like, it looks so flashy, it looks so cool. But then when you play it, it actually just feels overwhelming. I think a lot of times designers can over-design, like get in their head and over-design things. When in reality, I think you probably want to stick with what's simple first, or try to at least. I remember when I was working on my senior project as well, for when I was back in college. I like looked at my map at one point. I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. Like everything just looks like I like threw paint onto like a canvas and like let it sit there for a little bit. And so I think that's fine. Like if you just want to get ideas down, but I think not every idea can stay. I think as well, it's like you kind of just need to pick 1 to 2, maybe 3 things that you really like and keep it and work on it. And be okay getting rid of ideas that might seem like too much. So yeah, I would say try to keep it.
Another question. What are the skills that you should have to be a level designer?
Yeah. So I think for level designers, you definitely need to understand scale, if that makes sense, where it's like, how big, every game is different. So I think level design for every game varies, but I think it's like some of the key principles for level design, like using light to guide players. Like if you think of players as bugs or moths that always follow light, it helps a lot, honestly, in terms of like, hey, like you don't want a player to go here, just leave it dark. If you want them to go down this hallway, just put light in it. Boom, done. Like it's a lot of level design is just trying to constantly guide the player as to where they're supposed to be going. And if your player gets lost, especially like in a single player game, I think there's obviously something that's not going right. So there's benefits to fix that too. Another thing is scale. So depending on how tall your character is, or how fast they move, you'll have to make levels like bigger or smaller depending on it. So games like Last of Us that are very realistic, they have realistic doors, they have realistic hallways and stuff like that. So everything feels natural almost because you're piloting almost like a person. And so all of that needs to make sense where it's like, oh, if you're playing Overwatch, the maps are pretty big, right? Or they're a lot, like the doorways are a lot wider because you have to keep in mind someone as big as Reinhardt could be walking through that door, or someone as small as I guess Sombra should be walking through that door as well. So you kind of need to like gauge how big and small you make these things. And so yeah, I would say keep scale in mind, keep light in mind. You don't have to be like a crazy lighting artist. I think just having the idea of like, hey, light will guide players can go a long way. I'd also say play Portal. That game is sick. If you really like sit down and look at the puzzles in Portal, like just from a level design perspective, like for example, when you enter a room for the first time, the exit is always right in front of you. Like you can always see the exit. And so it's like that is immediately your goal that you have to achieve. And again, I think a lot of games do that as well. We call them also like landmarking as well as a really good thing. We call them weenies. It's a Disney term. Where you kind of have like this big thing over in the distance that's your end goal. So if you think of I think Halo does this really well, where it's like they have like this big ass ship out in the distance, and like, hey, you gotta go to that. And so okay, and then you start making your way to the level. Even though you don't get to the ship in like 20 minutes, having that landmark when you first enter the area, say, hey, you're going there, and so the player feels anchored to like achieve that goal. So.
Which part of the level design process of the company is your favorite and your least?
It's tough because I enjoy all of it, but I also get frustrated at all of it. I think the most fun part is definitely like the early concepting where it's like, hey, like what do we want the map to be? And so it's like it's like, do we want the map to be super close quarters and like really put like shotguns into the forefront or like close range weaponry and like so you start building spaces like that. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is cool. This sounds really cool. It's always when it sounds really cool when it's most it's when it's the most fun. But when you actually start doing it, it's like, wow, this is not working the way I thought it would. But then going into the problem solving, I was like, okay, how do we make this work? Is a lot of fun because then it's like solving a Rubik's cube where it's just like you can get there. It'll just take time. But even then, the solution that you come up with probably isn't the only solution. And so there's like multiple different ways that you can like make a section of a map and like make it work with the same goals. So I think that's pretty interesting as well.
Any recommendations for us? We are going out of time. We are going to learn.
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to apply to places. Like I know, I remember when I first applied to Riot, I was like, it's like shot, I'm getting this job, like this one. But I was like, I might as well do it. And actually, a fun fact is that I had also applied to Insomniac that same week. And I got an email from them like almost right away saying like, hey, sorry, like we didn't accept your application. Thanks for applying. I was like, damn, I'm cooked. If they said no to me, Riot's gonna say no to me too. And then I got an email like maybe like 2 weeks after saying like, hey, like you'd like to schedule a phone call and stuff like that. So even if you get rejected from one place, like that doesn't mean that you are worthless. Basically, like you definitely have something to give still to anyone really. So don't if you get any rejections or anything like that, don't it's good to like take it and move on and like understand what could be better, but don't like let that stop you basically.
Okay. So besides trial and error, what's another way to improve as a level designer?
Honestly, I mean, personally, I think it's just a lot of just making levels and just getting comfortable with like making levels and testing and iterating. Another thing is, if you build on your philosophy and have it be sound, I think that can start to iterate for you without iterating. If that makes sense. It's like, oh, if you have a strong philosophy on what you want to do for the map or for the game, it can help a lot in terms of like, okay, this obviously wouldn't work, so let's just move on and stuff like that. Like trying to having a strong goal is a lot of that, honestly. Where it's like you can already just you don't have to do trial and error if it's not meeting your goal on paper. So yeah, but I think to improve as a game designer and as a level designer when you're first starting out, is just make stuff. Whatever you make, it's gonna suck. Like I was making some really bad maps when I first started. But you have to learn and you have to take feedback. I think creating stuff and getting feedback from people, I think from other designers is way better than getting feedback from players. Because I think a lot of players will play something and if they had fun for 5 minutes, like, yeah, this is great. I don't see anything wrong with it. I went like 5-1. Like, I don't care. But I think if you talk to other designers and they like take a look at it, like they should be asking you like, hey, like what do you want? Like what's your loop? Like what is your gameplay loop that you want? What is your goals here? Like what do you want to be doing? And they'll kind of pick it apart in a way that makes you better as a designer as well. So yeah.
What tools do you use on your workflow? I really that you use paper prototyping or that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess the designer for level design, I speak to other design disciplines as well. Most of what I use is Unreal. I use a level design pack called Supergrid. Pretty sure it's free. I've downloaded it myself on my personal computer. And it's basically like you can just build. All it does is like it gives you a set of prefab like meshes. It's like boxes, slopes, some rounded corners maybe. But that's really all you need for like basic level design. Is like some slopes and some flies. Really like Legos, honestly. So yeah, that's kind of what I use. And I just scale them in Unreal, and then I just press play, and they have collision on them, so I can just walk around them. I know some other studios use Maya for that same purpose, but it's the same thing, just a different software where you just take blocks and move them around, and then you export it to Unreal. We use blueprinting a lot in Unreal, like blueprint scripting. I can't blueprint that much, but I can like read a script and I tell you like where a bug might be. So like, it's pretty helpful to know blueprinting as well. We also do a lot of documentation. I didn't realize how much writing you do as a designer, like just in Google Docs or Microsoft Word. It's just like a lot of like, hey, let's try to get this down on paper first. And I think paper getting is the terminology. So yeah, just trying to get stuff down on paper first, and like, does that make sense? Okay, cool. We can probably go and implement an engine, or yeah, this sounds like an awful idea. Why would we ever do this? But it's good to have that conversation first on paper before you start putting time into putting stuff in engine, because that takes the most work. And then you kind of want to move a little fast especially when you're on a tight schedule. So yeah. Yeah, and then I guess to speak more to like other disciplines as well, like artists use Maya a lot for like 3D modeling, Blender sometimes as well. I think Blender and Maya honestly are interchangeable. It's like kind of waiting for it. And then like Substance Designer, Substance Painter for textures. I think that's like mostly the display art stuff I've seen. But yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Again.
What is the quality standard for this? So we didn't know that the map is ready for release.
So from the art standpoint, at least, it's definitely like, hey, like, does the map look good and does it play good? I think it's a bit more of like a, hey, it's like almost like a feeling, almost where it's like, yeah, this feels good. And you kind of have to get your feelings in line by the deadline, almost, if that makes sense. But there's definitely a lot more of like, hey, like, there's just always quality stuff as well, where it's like, hey, like, this thing over here is floating, that can't float, like, so you gotta put it on the ground, or like, there's a UV that's messed up, or there's a gap in this mesh, like, we need to close that gap. So there's obvious stuff like that, like, hey, like, this is obviously broken. But in terms of like quality for gameplay, it's a bit ambiguous. We do have a gameplay analysis team, the GAT team, where they are basically like a bunch of ex-pro players and like high-ranked players as well for Valorant that play our content and like give us feedback on it. And they're kind of like helping us decide that quality bar, where they're like, hey, yeah, this feels different, but it feels good. It feels like a good different. Like it's not like bad, where it's like, I don't know where people are coming from, like there's too many angles and stuff like that. I think there's definitely like it's a lot of gameplay feel, and so it's kind of hard to like check off a box and be like, okay, it's done, move on to the next one. It's like no, it's a lot of like playing it, seeing how it feels, and then once you feel confident, like that's when you move on to the next step. There's some times where it's like, hey, we don't have a lot of time to figure this out, really, if that makes sense, where it's like where you kind of just like take a shot in the dark and then you release something and you're like, I hope to God that worked. And then you can always update it later, but you know, I think first impressions are pretty important. But yeah, there is definitely going to be a lot of times as a designer where you're reaching a deadline and you don't know if something that you're making is like good enough yet. And I like, you know, whenever I do map stuff and it's like close to a deadline, I'm like, I don't know if this is like good. It's always nice to have other designers around you to ground yourself and be like, yeah, like, I mean, honestly, my one level designer who's like, who works with me, he was like, hey, if it was shit, I would have told you like 2 months ago. So yeah, and so I think you can get in your head a lot of the time. So try not to get in your head.
Okay, so how do you choose to balance between higher level players and competitive ones and versus casual players that are there for fun? So sometimes there's stuff that's busted but it's really fun for lower with fewer players, and sometimes there's stuff that's not that fun but balanced for competitive players.
Yeah, I think all games are different that have that. If the game is an esport, they all take it differently. I think League definitely balances more for like all levels of play, and we do too. I would say I think we do definitely index more towards pro play because of the way that Valorant is. I think there's a lot of like trickle down effect where it's like, hey, if you see something in pro play, it's not easy to replicate, but it's easy to like kind of understand the thinking, and so. You know, we're seeing a lot of neon right now, so people are probably going to pick it up and play it ranked, so like that. And so, you know, it'll be up to us to decide, like, hey, do we think this is healthy? Do we want to change this? But it is hard because there are times where we know something for pro play, and it's like now it's just harder for the casual player. And yeah, I mean, there's always that balance, but I think if it's in the name of game health and like the game being healthy, then it's probably better. It's probably better at like generally just to do it, even if it feels bad for casual and say, yeah, this is not helping for the game. We should not have it because it's going to be a long-term nightmare. So we just need to get rid of it.
Apart from your work in the realm of Valorant, did you have any personal projects?
Yeah, I personally don't have many personal projects because I'm quite busy already at work. The best that I try to do is play as many games as I can. I've been playing a lot of indie games recently against like on Steam Deck. So yeah, I would say keep those personal projects honestly because I think they help a lot. I honestly should probably get some because there's times where it's like, man, I just need to work on something else. That's not Valorant sometimes. And not to say that I hate it, but it's like, doing the same thing like over and over again, and it can get mentally exhausting. And so having something else that you can work on for a little bit that's a lot more fun, not as high stress, I think it helps a lot to your mentality. So I would say, yeah, to keep personal projects. I'm not doing great.
Photo engines and their abilities affects the main creation and all works.
Yeah, we're always keeping agent abilities in mind. I think the most obvious one are like when the agents have like a boost ability, like jet updraft or sage wall, or raise blast pack where they can get on top of stuff. There's a lot of times where you have to like keep in mind, say, okay, at any moment this character could be like 6 feet in the air and just be looking at some really weird stuff that other characters can't. Because not every character has a boost ability, and so you kind of have to like keep in mind. And again, it kind of goes towards like scale and like understanding what your game is trying to do. Because again, Overwatch, they have really wide open levels, like a lot of levels that have super high ceilings or no ceilings at all, because they have a lot of characters that can fly. And so you need to keep that in mind where it's like, hey, like if I have this ceiling here, this character can fly and they're gonna hit the ceiling, doesn't feel great. And the same thing is for the iron, where it's like, hey, if there's a bunch of elevation, it feels really awkward if you're someone like Tejo who's walking through a space and you have to like look up all the time because if there's a jet on the team, they can literally be anywhere. And so trying to like balance it where it's like, hey, if you have a movement ability, you should be able to empower to use this piece of geo that is like very exclusive to you and it feels really good to use that. But if you don't have a movement ability, you shouldn't feel like, oh, I'm just going to lose because I picked the wrong character. So.
Okay. Okay. Una más, por favor. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate so much that you staying here and inspire our students.
I mean, thank you all for coming. 3 hours drive is a long time. So thank you. 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
No, yeah.